All right. Good Erev Yontiv, everybody. Gemar Chasima Tova. I want to talk about one of the minhagim of the night of Yom Kippur and how I believe things may have been misinterpreted about this particular minhag if we look at it in a historical perspective. And perhaps the same thing could be said also about one of the minhagim of the night of Hoshana Rabbah. It's a similar thing, and how perhaps these things developed in a way that were interpreted in different ways by subsequent tzaddikim. So there's a minhag. I've mostly only seen it in Hasidic shuls, that on the night of Yom Kippur, after Maariv, with all the slichas and everything, to recite all 7 of the Shir HaYichud, and then also, many will also recite the Shir HaYichud. And for the most part, if you want to find the text of the Shir HaYichud other than for Shabbos, many Hasidim will sing the Shir HaYichud for Shabbos as one of the Zemiras on Shabbos. It's a fairly common minhag in Hasidic communities. But then you have the other Shir HaYichud. If you want to find them printed somewhere, generally we'll say you go to the Yom Kippur Machzor. That's where you're going to find them. And the truth is, the art scroll, they do have it in English, and to me, it's one of my favorite parts of Jewish liturgical poetry of all, is the Shir HaYichud. These 7 songs, which are basically theology lessons. It means the song of unity, and it talks about God's unity in a beautiful poetic song form. They're not short. They could be, different days of the week are longer than others. Wednesday is probably, I think, the longest of the 7. And as I said, a contemporary minhag that, again, you probably don't find in too many places. Outside the Hasidic community, maybe some of the Yekas also, is, as I said, to recite all 7 tonight. As I'm speaking today is Erev Yom Kippur, so it will be tonight after Maariv to recite all 7. I'll be honest, I have a very hard time making it through all 7 Shir HaYichud, and it depends what kind of crowd is in shul, whether or not we say them or not, generally. But past years, I remember probably the first time I ever saw it actually being practiced. I was davening in a shul called Kahal Hasidei Yerushalayim, and over there I remember falling asleep while they were saying it, kind of sleeping through the whole thing, more or less. As I said, it's quite long. It would probably take, even if you recite it rather quickly, I would imagine it could take 20 minutes to maybe a half hour to recite all 7 of these Shir HaYichud. And it could take longer if you're going to recite it slowly, obviously. So it's an intensive involvement in reciting these hymns. If you look at most of the commentators, the Achronim, you'll see the explanation of why do we say these on the night of Yom Kippur is because these are such holy songs, and they should really only be recited at an extremely holy time. And so therefore they're not to be recited just at any time, but at a holy time, such as the night of Yom Kippur. Incidentally, in Satmar, at least the minhag with the Satmarov was to recite during the Shabbosim of Sfira from Pesach until Shavuos. Shabbos by the daytime meal, by the daytime Suda, by lunch, to recite each week one of the 7 Shir HaYichud from Pesach till Shavuos, which is an interesting minhag. That connecting these 7 songs to the 7 spheres, the 7 weeks of Sphira, which is an interesting approach, and it's something that I have done for a few years. This year, upon discovering that there was such a minhag in the old days, pretty much since Rosh Chodesh Iyar, I've been saying Bli Neder. Maybe I missed 1 or 2 days and made up for it the next day. Every day, there's Shir HaYichud. And as I discovered that for centuries, it was a minhag in Ashkenaz to recite every day the Shir HaYichud. As one of my Rebbeim put it, was an excuse to say one more Kaddish after davening. You say Tehillim, and you say Kaddish, you say the Shir HaYichud, and you say Kaddish. And that was the old minhag, was every day to recite the Shir HaYichud. There's a machloikas about who wrote the Shir HaYichud, but it's generally understood that it was Rav Shmuel HaChassid, who was the father of Rav Yehuda HaChassid, the author of the Sefer Chassidim. Now, in the Minhagei Vermiza, the Minhagim of Worms in Germany, it brings there the Minhagim of the recitation of the Shir HaYichud that was practiced in Worms. It would seem that throughout most of Ashkenaz, the common custom was to recite the Shir HaYichud every day after davening, after Shachris, after the morning service. However, in Worms, in the winter, they would recite it before Shachris, because people were getting up early to daven, and it was still dark, and so before davening, they would recite the Shir HaYichud, pretty much from Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan until Rosh Chodesh Iyar, and from Rosh Chodesh Iyar throughout the summer into the fall, it would be recited after davening, which was the more common minhag. It seems that other places did not switch morning and evening that way. With that being said, there was something that I just read yesterday and I wasn't aware of, was that pretty much from Shabbos Shuvah, or maybe even earlier from Rosh Hashanah, I don't remember exactly what it said, until Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan, they did not recite the Shir HaYichud in Worms. I don't know about other places in Ashkenaz, but they did not recite the Shir HaYichud, nor did they recite Tehillim after davening. They didn't recite the Psalms, which generally was the custom that they would, after davening, or it would seem maybe in the winter before davening, they'd recite Tehillim and say Kaddish. They left this out, at least of the communal prayers, during this time of the year, which seems strange because this is a time of the year that we're seeking to be more devoted to God with Yom Kippur. And the reason why they didn't recite it was practical, and actually it gives some insight into how people lived and how people thought in the old days. Not too different than today. We're talking the 1600s. What actually was, I could have entered there, I didn't realize, was that at this time of the year was the grape harvest and the vintage time for when they would make wine. And the vintners were very busy making wine. And if they had to stay in shul longer to say the Shir HaYichud and to say Tehillim, they would probably just not go to shul at all. And so in order to get people to be able to get out of shul on time, the minhag became in Worms was to skip these parts of the davening that were not inherent required parts of the davening, in order to get people out of shul more quickly so that they could get to work, because this was their busy season of work. And for this reason, because they did not recite these hymns and the psalms regularly at this time of the year, and they omitted it from their prayers, they decided that on the night of Yom Kippur they would make up the whole Shir HaYichud that they missed, and kind of make up for that by reciting on the night of Yom Kippur. And on the night of Hoshana Rabbah, they would say all the Tehillim to make up for what they missed not saying Tehillim during the month of Tishrei. And so later in history it was interpreted other ways, but most likely that is, I believe, the historical reason why we recite the Shir HaYichud on the night of Yom Kippur. Not because it's such, of course it is a very holy night, I'm not denying that. But the reason was not because of the holiness of the night and that it should only be recited on the holy night, but rather because since it's been left out of the davening for a practical reason, because people had to go to work, they made up for it on the night of Yom Kippur. And that is probably the historical reason for this minhag to recite the Shir HaYichud on the night of Yom Kippur, because it was the custom to say it every day. It wasn't something special just for Yom Kippur. It was designed for every day, and it was, and because it was omitted, because people had a busy work schedule at a particular time of year, that's why they would recite it on the night of Yom Kippur instead. All right, thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment. We'll see you later.